Hey folks, this is Kelani. With 1 week left until the next raid opens up, that leaves us with very little time to finish getting ready to plunder Azshara's Eternal Palace. Patch 8.2 might be well underway, and a handful of folks out there have managed to grind their way to Revered with both the Nazjatar and Mechagon faction. Yeah, that's right, so if you see a few people flying around without making use of the super awesome gravity packs from Mechagon, now you know why. It's pretty crazy how far ahead you can get if you do absolutely everything there is to do in the 2 new zones, but there's no way to get into the raid earlier than everyone else. Next week will be the first time anyone can hop into the Eternal Palace, and you should make sure that first step is as good as it can be. So let's have a look at how you can get ready for the Eternal Palace raid with the 1 week that we have left. One huge feature that's brand new in patch 8.2 is the Titan Essence changes for the Heart of Azeroth. You now have access to a decent variety of powerful abilities, but only if you actually go out and pick them up. You'll have to do a wide variety of content, including both PvE and PvP, if you want to unlock all of the essences that we have access to right now. There are a handful of these essences that won't be available until next week because they need Season 3 to be active. So obviously we can't do anything about that until next week, although you might be able to pick up 1 or 2 of them at rank 1 or maybe even rank 2 before your raid time on reset day if you have the time to play that much. But that leaves us with plenty of essences to go after. There's 6 general essences that everyone has access to, and you can collect 4 of those right now. Only 2 are locked behind Season 3 requirements. There are also 5 essences for each role: tanks, healers and DPS. Every role has access to 3 out of their 5 essences right now, so you can pick those up quite easily during this week. You might have to do a few battlegrounds, maybe a few island expeditions, grind rep with the 2 new factions and all that good stuff. The great thing about collecting essences is that they tell you exactly where they come from. Just open up your Heart of Azeroth and hover over any of them that you don't have. It'll give you directions on how you can acquire them. So if you want 1 or 2 in particular, you can focus on them very easily. Personally, I think it's a great idea to get as many of the essences as you can, at least at rank 1. If something changes next week, or even the week after, and I can tell you from a lot of experience, week 1 of a new raid, and especially week 1 of the mythic difficulty opening up, is when a lot of tuning is usually done. You don't want to get caught with your pants down. I mean, I assume you don't. I'm not judging you if you do, but if your best essence suddenly becomes your worst essence, you don't want to have to start playing catch up after the raid releases. If you can manage it, get every essence that is available right now at rank 1, so you have plenty of options to pick and choose if your essences do change. A lot of essences are also quite specific in what they do and what types of encounters they would be good in. The Crucible of Flame isn't really going to do much for you on AoE, but it's fantastic for single target. The Blood of the Enemy, on the other hand, might not be too great on those patchwork single target fights, but it has some great AoE potential. So you might end up changing essences depending on the encounter you're facing. More choice is always a good thing when it comes to this kind of feature, and the only way you're going to have any choice at all is if you go out and get those essences. You can also start ranking up some of them already, so if you really want to push, you can go after some rank 2s as well. Thankfully, you can use a major essence if you're above heart level 35, which should be pretty much everyone at this point, I think. That means you're going to have access to at least 1 essence no matter who you are, but there is something else you might want to look into. At heart level 55, you can use a second minor power. Even though it's called a minor power, it can actually be a significant DPS increase. Some minor powers are actually stronger than the major powers, so it's definitely nothing to sniff at. But unlike the major power, that second minor slot isn't given to you for free. You'll have to put in a little bit of work to reach 55 before the raid goes live. We did just receive another round of artifact knowledge with a weekly reset, so it looks like we're back on the AK train, which means as the weeks go by it's going to be easier and easier to obtain that heart level 55. If you want to get it done before next week, you're going to have to buckle up your belt. Get all of those artifact power world quests done, all of the emissaries, get your island expedition weekly done, which gives you an essence by the way, so you should probably get that done regardless, and anything and everything else that rewards artifact power. The Battle of Desert Allure and Crucible of Storms bosses are giving 900 artifact power per boss once per week, regardless of difficulty. That's a good chunk of AP if you clear through the raids at least once, so keep that in mind if you're looking for some extra AP sources. Anyone going into the raid with their heart at 55 will be ahead of anyone who doesn't have it, but you have a week left if that's something you want to shoot for. Now, you're going to have a hard time killing any bosses if you don't know what the bosses do, or how to deal with their abilities. You don't have to know the ins and outs of the fight, every single little detail, but you should at least have a decent idea of what each ability, spell, or debuff does in a given encounter, and how you can deal with it if that burden falls on your shoulders. The best way to educate yourself when it comes to the new bosses is to give the adventure guide a quick look through. Every boss for the Eternal Palace is in the adventure guide, with a little bit of story, a general overview for each role, all of the boss's abilities on different difficulties, and all of the shiny loot you can cross your fingers for. You can get a general idea of how the raid will progress and which bosses you'll face in which order, and read up as much as you want. If you want to stick with just the quick overviews which highlight the important abilities and what each role needs to do in each fight, that will probably be fine if you're a DPS or you're just going into normal difficulty. For heroic difficulty, and for the tanks and healers out there, I would recommend you go through the individual abilities to get a better idea of how the fight is going to flow and where each piece of the puzzle will fall. It's always a wonderful dance, isn't it? You just need to learn the steps. It's always invaluable to know how a specific ability works, especially if you're having trouble with it. Being able to say, this ability needs to be split between as many players as possible, so we should all group up and use a healing cooldown, that's the kind of call that can save a raid, even if it's a pug raid. Usually pugs fall apart because they have no leadership and no communication. So if you read through the adventure guide and you figure out what the bosses do and how to deal with it, you can actually take a group of random players pretty far in a new raid just by leading them from what you've learned. So read up as much as you can, or as much as you want to, before the raid opens up so you can be the best raider possible when next week rolls around. Of course, there are several YouTube videos which give you a bit more detail and opinion on the fights if that's of interest to you. I usually find videos to be a better learning source because you can actually see what's being talked about, so it's much easier to recognize when that happens to you in-game. I know Hazel has been pumping out some pretty good guides, and as per usual, Fatboss has videos for most bosses in the new raid. Check them out if you're interested in video guides. Bear in mind though that any videos that are available right now could have outdated information on abilities or strategy because all of the fights will be from the PTR. Usually a handful of changes are made before the raid goes live, but it will all depend on the raid and what Blizzard decides to do. We'll see next week, I guess. You should also start getting your consumables in order, especially if you want to try and save a bit of gold and make the stuff yourself as opposed to buying it. You only have a week left to farm. The prices for herbs, potions, flasks and food will skyrocket at least somewhat when the raid releases. Sometimes the auction house is flooded all at the same time and the prices will actually drop for a very short period of time, so if you can catch that and snatch up as much as you can, then go for it. But otherwise you're going to end up spending a lot of your hard-earned gold on consumables if you can't make them for yourself. As a quick checklist, you'd want to make sure you have some form of food that provides stats. Anything is better than nothing, so even if it's just a secondary stat food, then go for that. Ideally, your raid group or guild would have a primary stat food given out to people, or a feast would be the best option. There is a new feast available in patch 8.2 which requires a cooking level of 160 to learn that will provide you with the very best food buff you can get right now. 131 primary stat. Shiny. If you're not pushing for any crazy kills, then you can make do with whatever you have, honestly. Some potions or flasks are always nice to have. There are new ones out there which are quite a bit better than what we've been working with so far in BfA, but they are incredibly expensive. So you have two choices. Pay up for the good stuff or coast along with the old stuff. Both are viable options, and again, if you're not pushing for crazy kills the first week or the first day, then you won't see a big enough difference to cover the gold cost most likely. It's okay to use old potions and flasks. Personally, we'll be rocking the old feasts for normal and heroic, maybe switching to the new feasts as we get closer to Azshara on heroic, and the same thing for flasks and potions. Old ones until we get close to the last boss, and then if we're running into minor DPS issues, we might start using the expensive consumables. We'll have to see how it goes. Don't break the bank on the first week. We're not even into Mythic yet, and that's where every little bit will really count. If you want to save some gold, you can spend a bit of time farming herbs, particularly the new herb in Azshara, and then you can get caught up with cooking in no time as well. It's always super satisfying being able to make all of your own consumables, or having someone in the guild be able to do it for you, but if you want to just fork over the gold, then you do you. Just make sure you have at least something for every type of consumable, because as I said, anything is better than nothing. It might be a good idea to get as far through the Azshara questline as you can as well. I'm talking about the main questline, which is time-gated by earning bodyguard experience. I just finished it today and can confirm that we get a quest at the end to defeat the last boss of the raid. The reward isn't anything super special, it's just 3000 artifact power, but that quest might have a few others after it, or you might get something else later on. Either way, being caught up will get you a few perks, and you'll also get to see the raid entrance a little early. With the raid entrance opening up at the end of the current questline that we have access to and it being locked otherwise, I wonder if players who haven't completed it will be able to pass through it all when next week rolls around. You might be able to get summoned without any issues, but can you actually run, or rather swim, to the raid entrance itself? That's going to be fun to find out, but I would err on the side of caution and get the questline done before next week, just in case. Something else you might want to take into consideration is the benthic gear. I can hear a few people laughing already. Yeah, you in the back, quiet down, alright? I know benthic gear starts at item level 385, but that's not where its true potential lies. Some of the benthic gear has special effects, and it's not just the extra chance to loot fish that's interesting to me. Some of them are actually throughput increases. They can either deal a bit of damage or do a bit of healing, sometimes for a really good amount. The trick here is to find a very specific piece of benthic gear that works for you. Some of the leather wrists, for example, that I'm interested in, deal frost damage to a single target or physical damage as AoE. Those might be pretty handy for a variety of reasons. So the way I would do this to get the most out of it is to buy wrist benthic tokens over and over again until I got that piece. But I wouldn't stop there. You can if you want to, sometimes a standard piece might be enough, but I would keep re-rolling the benthic tokens until I found the piece that I wanted, but with a socket. That's right, benthic pieces can roll sockets and all that good stuff, and a socket is now worth quite a bit more with the addition of epic gems. So roll benthic tokens until you get the one that you want with a socket, then upgrade it all the way to 425. That's going to be expensive, so you're going to need to do your mana pearl dailies and whatnot, but having a 425 piece of gear with a socket and an extra effect that will increase your DPS or healing, you probably won't replace that piece at all in Heroic. It might even be difficult to replace that piece with Mythic loot if the stats are terrible, or if that specific slot isn't available until later on in the raid. So it will set you up for a good while, but I would only really consider this if you're trying to push Heroic in the first week, and then hopping into Mythic the week after, and you don't have any better uses for your mana pearls. They are used for quite a few rewards like mounts and essences, so double check before you go ham on benthic gear. And then, as per usual with Battle for Azeroth, you want to save up your reroll tokens. These are going to be the same ones for the next raid. Ideally, you would have been saving them already, I guess, but seeing as it's reset day for EU, do not spend any reroll tokens from this point onwards. That very same token will be used in the Eternal Palace, so going into next week with 5 available in your currency tab, and then 2 available on the token vendor, gives you a total of 7 to use next week. You could use them on as many bosses as you can kill in Heroic, or you can just spend 2, and then save 7 again for Mythic week. It depends on what progress you're looking for and whether or not you're hopping into Mythic that very first week it becomes available. No matter what you decide to do, re-rolling in the Eternal Palace will always yield better results when compared to re-rolling in the Battle of Desert Allure or the Crucible of Storms. The item level difference alone is going to be huge, so start saving those re-roll tokens if you haven't been already. And that's all I have for you in this video. Is there anything else you're doing to prepare for the Eternal Palace raid? How excited are you to finally take the fight to Queen Azshara herself? Leave all your thoughts in the comments section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave. If you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always, I will see you next time.